future of cannabis, because when cannabis is legalized on a federal level, it's still not legal because we can't put it in food or beverage. We can't feed it to animals. We can't give it to our pets. Right now, if you're a veterinarian, you could lose your license by prescribing cannabis or CBD for pets. And it's a horrible situation that they're in because they know that it works, but they're in a legal quandary by just being able to tell anyone.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really excited about having Keith join us and talk about, and your guest, your little black cat there. And we'll see if I've got another one that comes and joins me here in a minute. But anyways, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I'm excited to have you guys on. If you guys do join or when you join, please say hello. Drop a little comment and let us know where you're saying hello from. And then also, if you have any questions for Keith, or if any topics or any conversation sparks any interest and you want to dive into a little bit further, don't hesitate to drop a question. I'd love to hear from you and highlight what you're doing. So without further ado, Keith, I'm excited to have you on. Thank you very much for taking your morning and joining us. Do you mind giving us a quick intro about how you got into this industry, a little bit about your background prior to entering the hemp and cannabis industry?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mandi.
Yeah.
So it's cool to be here. So I don't have much of a background before hemp and cannabis because I was introduced to it at the age of 14.
That's great.
So I was at my first legalization rally in 1979 in Washington, D.C. There is a legalization rally there called the Smoke-In, which began in 71. And is the longest continuous running event in Washington, D.C., permitted event in Washington, D.C. And I was brought into it at a very young age. There were some famous people in our industry who actually promoted and created that event, and I became friends with them. I joined the cannabis tribe by age 15. I was a full member. And later on, in the early 90s, my friend Steve D'Angelo opened up a hemp clothing store called Ecolution. That was in the early 1990s, right here in the Washington, D.C. area, where I was a vendor to that company, and I made products that Ecolution sold. I've been on the cannabis and hemp advocacy team for 4 decades. I am a regular at the Smoke-In. I still go there every year and
That's awesome.
participate fully.
You have to go just to see your friends and rub shoulders with all the people that you've built.
I do. I love that event. It's every July 4th, and I absolutely love that event. So it's a wonderful thing to be a participant in. So over time, I entered the industry on the gray side, we'll call it, after the 2014 Farm Bill changed over, and we were allowed to work with hemp for research purposes. And then on the white side, after the 2018 Farm Bill completed with full legalization of hemp. In the interim, I am the co-chair for the National Cannabis Industry Association's Hemp Committee. And we basically work on policy and information for both the public and the industry about the bridge between hemp and cannabis, and how they're basically, they are the same plant with just a different designation depending on who you're talking to. So my life before hemp and cannabis really didn't exist. I was riding bicycles and enjoying life. But then I joined this world, and I'm so glad I'm a part of it. I'm honored to have spent 4 decades working to legalize this plant and being a part of the final legalization of hemp. And now cannabis being prolific across the U.S. and the world. So that's basically my story, Mandi.
Okay, so I want to know, there's a lot of buzz right now about bridging this gap in cannabis and hemp, right? And being on a cannabis organization, what does the bridge look like since you're heading the hemp side? Right? Talk to me a little bit about this.
That's a cool question.
And I
Yeah,
have a
that's a
question
cool
to talk about,
question.
right? Is I was approached when I was at the SHE conference, the Southern Hemp Expo,
Uh-huh.
with concern that our states and organizations are fighting against each other within their state, right? Because of the
Oh,
regulation.
so true.
So, talk to me
So true.
a little bit about this and what does it look like for the industry?
Well, first let me start with Virginia.
Yeah.
Virginia has legalized cannabis, and hemp is legal to consume and produce in the state. However, they have made no provisions for the sale of cannabis, and there is nothing even on the outskirts until about 2024. So there's a group of people here in Virginia who has attempted to bridge both hemp and cannabis. And actually, this Saturday, we are giving away over 100,000 hemp and cannabis seeds across the state of Virginia at 11 locations all day long, all free. Because in Virginia, we're allowed to gift cannabis, but you're not allowed to sell it. So, in our hopes to promote education and growing and learning about the plant, and now that it's legal, since we can't sell it, we were able to get a bunch of people who donated over 100,000 seeds and dozens of people to package these seeds and put it all together and build a website, which is called virginiaseeds.com. And this Saturday, we're giving away we've made 15,000 packets of seeds that have that
That's awesome.
100,000. It's so cool. We've got a couple of live bands in Virginia Beach with our headquarters, and the news should be there. And we have 11 locations across the state where we are giving those seeds away. And that brings me to the hemp, because when hemp was legalized with the Farm Bill, they said anything under zero point 0.3 THC. Well, one of the things that is under zero point 0.3 THC is a seed.
Yeah.
So all seeds, theoretically, under today's legislative definition, are hemp seeds. And only once they are grown and mature do they become cannabis.
Right.
So that's part of the bridge that we're explaining to everybody, that all cannabis is hemp to start with under these definitions. And then how you grow it will be the outcome of the plant. But as a bigger picture on a federal level, we've got major issues about the understanding of hemp and cannabis as being one and being separate, because they're regulated under two different platforms. And you can sell hemp pretty much anywhere in the United States. There's a couple of states where there are a few issues, but you can sell it anywhere. Whereas cannabis, if you don't have a license, you can't sell it.
Mm.
And big demarcation point here. So, what would you like to talk about in that realm? Because it's like a spider web
Okay.
heading in
So
every direction.
I have a question about your seeds, right? And growing the seeds.
Okay,
People that take
sure.
them, can they in Virginia just plant them? Right? Or
So
do you have to have a license?
Virginia created, without a license, correct. Virginia
Okay.
created a structure, since there is no retail sales that avail. We have 4 dispensaries in the state which require a doctor's permission to buy any product from it. And there won't be any retail sales of recreational, as the world calls it, cannabis. So they allow each household to grow up to 4 plants as long as they're not in the sight of the public. So if you have a fairly private place or you want to grow indoors, everyone in Virginia is allowed to grow 4 plants. You're supposed to put your name and your ID number on the base of the plants, and that's really the only requirement.
Interesting.
So that's why we looked at it as, well, let's start teaching the state how to grow. And there's lots of people who would love to be, to participate and to grow plants, but it's illegal to buy a seed. So we decided to give them away. So
So cool. Okay, so I have a question then about this cannabis definition, right? There have been a number of times I've been pretty involved in conversation with the investors or with people that are not in our industry, but maybe interested, or I'm trying to spark conversation around the industry. And as soon as I
Hmm.
use the word cannabis, it's like the whole conversation shuts down. What efforts
Yeah.
or what really needs to happen in your mind, or strategy could we implement to bridge that gap in the communication or understanding that hemp is cannabis?
Well, there's really a couple of things going on here. So we got hemp. Hemp is acceptable because everybody looks at it as an industrial product, something that makes fiber or clothing. And now we know we can make batteries and semiconductors and graphene and all kinds of things that the public doesn't know that we can do with it. I've got hemp frisbees here. I'm wearing hemp clothing. I have hemp socks and hemp underwear on right now. And so, there's so many things that the hemp plant is so versatile. And thanks to Jack Herrer and the work
Yeah,
that he did back in the 90s and really the late 80s, Jack set that groundwork where people understand there is a difference. But the reality between the two plants is hemp and cannabis were grown together because they are the same plant for more than 4,000 years. Um,
yeah,
it's thought that it's the first domesticated crop by humans. It is certainly possible if it wasn't the first, it was within the first five.
yeah.
So cannabis has been around forever. We have an education problem because of the last 70 years of a smear campaign against this plant because it is so useful that it was detrimental to the corporations
The
as a whole.
profit, right? The
And
greed.
they've done an incredible job of propaganda, basically getting the whole world to believe that this is the devil's weed. When
Mhm.
in fact, what it is a companion plant to mammals that was designed to be here and growing in the ground next to mammals where they would consume it. And it's a regulatory body, is what it really does,
Mhm.
because we've now found out that our bodies are managed by an endocannabinoid system.
Mhm.
Cannabinoids being the compounds which are found in cannabis. And we have a system which creates these cannabinoids internally. And this plant, the cannabis and hemp plant, produces them externally. So we can ingest these cannabinoids and bring our body back into balance. And that's really the education that's required, is to get across to the world of the incredible potential that cannabis has to reduce and eliminate many types of pharmaceutical drugs and bring back to a natural state of natural living. And that to me is the number one campaign that needs to get out there, is that cannabis is safe. Cannabis is effective. It is both a food, a medicine, and a drug. So it's how you utilize this plant that will basically bring us into the future. And that's what I'm spending all my time, is researching and working on the cannabinoids, the compounds, the formulations, the science, a continuous educational process for the public. So that
Absolutely.
to me is the most important thing, is cannabis is safe. We all know, being in the cannabis industry, that there is not one reported death from the use of cannabis or hemp through all of the history of known recorded history. And there is no other compound that we can identify that has the same safety profile, where there is no known recorded death. Even water and air kill people. So how is it that a plant which has no deaths attributed to it over the history of mankind is considered dangerous?
Right, right.
So
Well,
that
and
is the best campaign of propaganda ever.
Well, and then yeah, yeah. Well, I remember sitting in DARE class as a kid, right? And through our
Oh, what a
schools being
campaign.
told, yes, yes, that,
That
this is a gateway drug. And people now still today, if I say, "Hey, we should try cannabis," especially a lot of people that I know that are addicted to opioids, right? We'll talk about cannabis, and it's been a big challenge where I'm at in Utah because there's a lot of physicians that their license are being threatened based on who they're working under if they're prescribed or prescribing cannabis. So we have these conversations a lot with them, right? Now, understanding what you just said and how great the plant is, right? Now we move to the growing of it or to the farming of it, right? And I get a lot of farmers that say, well, what if my neighbor's cattle get into it? And what do we do to address the it's healthy for us, it's healthy for animals, but yet we can't feed it to our cattle or our chickens or our pigs that are being fed into our food supply and supply chain. So how do you address that, and what do you suggest there?
Well,
Because
there are studies already taking place. I
Mhm,
think Oregon is leading the way
mhm,
on those studies right now.
mhm,
And basically, again, what's happened is so if we were to look at this from the FDA's perspective, the FDA views cannabis as a new dietary ingredient, meaning it's something that is new. It didn't exist before the FDA existed. It's not grandfathered in as safe or GRAS, which means generally recognized as safe. So all of the products that we consumed before the FDA came into the picture were grandfathered in as old dietary ingredients. But the issue is that during the period when the FDA became into existence, cannabis was under full prohibition. So it was not considered a part or an old dietary ingredient. And this to me is really what stops the entire industry from moving forward is the FDA has taken the standpoint that this product was never used prior to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And therefore, it is a new dietary ingredient which requires testing and safety protocols from A to Z. So if we're going to feed it to humans, we have to do all the toxicology tests and long-term studies. And if we're going to feed it to animals, we have to do twice those studies. We have to study the animals and then we have to study the effects on those who consume the animals. So I've been trying to get the industry to stand behind the old dietary ingredient tact, but I don't know how to get anyone there because it really doesn't exist. This is the only product that fits an ODI that isn't an ODI. So if we could get the FDA to understand and to agree that this product was used and consumed prior to their inception and that it meets the requirements for that, that would open the door for the product in all types of mediums, food, beverages on a legal level from the FDA.
mhm.
So that's the hardest thing to do, and I've been told over and over again it'll never happen. Give up. Now, recently, two hemp companies went through an NDI
Mhm.
application process, and they were both denied. And these are large companies. It was Irwin Naturals and Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
These are pioneers in the industry who had done all of the safety protocols, all of the work. They had all of the information they submitted, and they were still denied as a new dietary ingredient. So it's basically in our system. Our system is broken, and it is
Well,
not prepared to take
it's been written
it.
to eliminate anything hemp and cannabis, right? I mean,
Correct. And that's
I had
exactly
to
what
look
I was
at
going to say.
existing rules and regulations. You literally have to extract or amend everything to allow for hemp to be included, even in something like PACA, the Perishable Foods Act,
Yes. And
those types of
so
things.
there are now the director of Health and Human Services can do this himself. He has the authority. That is a single person who has the authority to do this. Congress also has the authority to do this, and it could be argued that the president does too. So it's basically you got a small group of people or two individual men that need to be convinced or shown the way or led off of the path of the pharmaceuticals to bringing in a more natural environment for our country. If that could take place, we might have a chance.
Okay,
But
so there's a really good question on here. And when we talk about the pharmaceuticals, right, are the patents around pharmaceutical. It says,
mhm.
how do we remove the government from having a patent on hemp, and how does the patent impact the industry?
Well, so that patent that the person who wrote in is probably talking about the original patent on the neuroprotective properties of cannabinoids. Since that time, there are probably thousands of patents, and I read patents all the time. What scares me is there are companies and large organizations who have patented every manner of ingredient and process to put hemp together into a finished product. And many of those patents have not only been published, but they've been granted. So somewhere down the road, some company's going to say, hey, you can't add cocoa butter to that product unless you pay me a royalty. And that's what's happened now with our patent process. So it is so convoluted at the moment of patents because patents are in a very weird position. Patents are granted or not granted based on prior artwork. And since you couldn't file, no one did file patents for illegal items, i.e., cannabis, there's no
Right.
prior artwork. So all of these things, you put in cannabis and cocoa butter or this or that, would have already expired long ago from patents that were done in the early 1900s. But now, since there is no prior artwork and the patent examiners don't know what to do with this because there is nothing published anywhere about these formulations and compounding of cannabis, that they grant them. And I've seen some patents that were granted that were extraordinary. They covered like everything in the industry and
Yeah.
everything that everyone's doing. And I wonder what will happen someday. The government's patent is just the start of thousands of patents which have been made on the cannabis plant, many of them by big companies and many of them by pharmaceutical
Right. Well,
companies. So
yes. I mean, and I've even within our group, you hear two people that say they have a similar patent. And
all
so
the
it's,
time. Yeah.
I hear it come up often. And especially now as the industry is evolving, IP is really, they're coming out of the woodwork. And like you said, now
Oh,
that it's
it's
legal and we're starting to talk about it and it's evolving, it's very, very exciting.
yeah, it's so I don't know where that's all going to go because I've read so many patents that were just disturbing that the patent office would grant such a broad statement of claims
Yeah.
that covered so many things.
Yeah.
And, just because he was the first person to write it during Prohibition.
Yeah.
Nobody actually published any of this data over time. It was in underground journals. Jack Kerr was one of the first to really do any work of publishing information about the cannabis plant. Since the 30s or 40s, all publications stopped in the 40s.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's
So a question I want to highlight this is ODI sounds like the shortest path to solving the FDA problem. Let's make that a focus.
oh,
So
I've been focusing on it since 2018.
yes.
When hemp was legalized, that's when the FDA took it away from us. It was within an hour, and no one knew it. And we're all marching around in the streets of Washington like we are the champions, and the FDA had already taken it away. So
Yeah.
that is definitely the cleanest, straightest path. I would. Many people told me it's the most difficult by far, and that the only way to accomplish it is to do it 50 states at a time, just like cannabis was legalized, and to go into the state legislatures and have the states announce that cannabis and hemp is an old dietary ingredient, not a new dietary ingredient, and therefore not subject to the FDC to the FD&C Act. So that is one path that we looked into a few years ago, but that's getting advocates in all 50 states. But it's just like cannabis, it's the same thing. And I keep saying that this is the most important thing in the future of cannabis, because when cannabis is legalized on a federal level, it's still not legal because we can't put it in food or beverage.
Right.
We can't feed it to animals. We can't give it to our pets. Right now, if you're a veterinarian, you can lose your license by prescribing cannabis or CBD for pets, and it's a horrible situation that they're in because they know that it works, but they're in a legal quandary by just being able to tell anyone they can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've
So
got plenty of physician friends that are saying the same thing, right? They want to,
yeah,
but now
definitely.
build this practice under an umbrella partnership or under this, practice, this larger practice, and their rules are no cannabis. And so therefore they cannot, even though they know it's a solution. And so, yeah, it puts people in a big pickle. So talk to me then. I think this leads into the need for science-based products, right? Because I feel like it really helps to bridge this gap. And so talk to me a little bit about your opinion here and the whys and really what you're doing to really lead that charge.
Sure. So, well, science-based products is where it's at. And there are, there's a percentage of the companies that are out there that are truly investing in the science, mine included. That's basically all we do at my company is science. We have a delivery method called Naturia Plus, which is intellectual property, filed a patent for it in 2017. It is an organic bypass of the liver's first pass metabolism, which allows the cannabinoids to enter the bloodstream without going through that first pass metabolism and being converted to their metabolites.
Mm,
So we get we call it better, faster, stronger, longer, but basically it's an evolutionary biohack that delivers cannabinoids much quicker on the front side. They hit much higher levels. So far, our research has shown a minimum of twofold, and we believe it's as high as tenfold in the right circumstances. But I can
yeah,
only support 2.2 fold currently, and that's all I'm going for.
yeah.
And then we have a super longevity because this delivery system works in like feeding our young, it works in a slow, fast, and medium pace. So there's immediate uptake, there's a midterm uptake, and there's a long term uptake dependent upon the molecular size we dial in the particles for. So the science on it, and not just Naturia, it's about doing these studies to make the government and the doctors and the public feel comfortable that cannabis and hemp are safe to ingest, and they are safe, and the drug interactions are also understood as to what they are and what it means if you're taking other drugs and then you consume cannabis. So we have been through a variety of studies. We've done a full clinical PK, which is the pharmacokinetics test that shows how much material makes it into the blood and how quickly that happens. We are now in a pain study, and we're working on an opioid study. And they're all incredibly difficult to do because the government shackles you in doing these
Mhm.
tests. I can't, you have to partner with a university. A university is federally funded, and therefore cannabis is federally illegal, and therefore the university can't do the research and still get their federal funding without another permission or grant. And it's made things quite difficult. So to test cannabis, we're having to have people consume it at their homes because you can't bring them into a commercial environment at the hospital or at the university and have them test cannabis. There are only a few universities who've overcome these boundaries so far. So it's just made life so difficult. We started with a human study at a cost of $50,000. And by the time we went through the regulatory hoops, we were at $650,000 for the same
Holy
study. Uh, and then we backed our way down to mice and rats and ultimately ended up with dogs because we couldn't afford to test on humans. So we're currently doing we have a study starting at the beginning of next year for arthritis and fibromyalgia and a few other things. We'll be testing about 300 patients on a nationwide level with one of our formulations. And we're doing this in a group of like a dozen companies, I believe. They're all cannabis companies. We're one of the only hemp companies involved. But the study, it's a major university study and by the way, everything's having to be done at home. No one's going into the university. Um, they're doing this study to see how effective cannabis is on arthritis and fibromyalgia and osteoporosis and a variety of
Mhm.
consistent, uh, troublesome pains.
Yeah.
And Now, that study alone costs a fortune, and it'll take 9 months to complete. It's a 3-month study, and it's taken about 6 months to get into it and get it even moving. So, not easy to do these projects. Now, science-based products is the future when you can state clearly that your product has X, Y, or Z drug interactions or no drug interactions. And by the way, we've seen this in our studies on dogs. We used our Naturia up against a standard MCT oil delivery system, and dogs do not ingest oils very well. And we had a 50% adverse drug reaction profile on the dogs using the MCT oil, where the Naturia Plus had a zero adverse drug event.
Mm.
So it was major. And the dogs had diarrhea and they vomited. And that's a result of ingesting those raw oils. So the Naturia is a powder and it fared much better with the dogs' bodies. But we know that's not the same in humans because I don't have people having diarrhea or throwing up from taking MCT oil. So we need to get these studies into humans. And
Well,
boy,
both.
if there's anyone out there listening, we
There's
know
so
how to
many,
do it. It just need help.
yeah. There's so many people that say all the time, that you just give your dog the same tincture or the same product you're using. And what you just shared, it just goes to show that they digest it differently. There's a lot of carrier oils that work versus not working. And this information just has to come out. It's got to be difficult to put validity behind some of these tests when you can't use universities. Has it been
Oh, it's so difficult.
yeah.
It's so difficult. We've gone through that ourselves. We've had people do research and studies for us, and we can't even use their name on the publications. So, because they literally could face consequences, and it makes no sense that even the doctors who are doing the research, their hands are tied for doing the research. So they just don't do it. And that's why it's not happening. We need to open up the ability to do research. Now, I just read, I think yesterday, that the DEA is now allowing research for cannabis to be done from products which are purchased from marijuana dispensaries. So that's a gigantic leap forward. But
Yeah.
we still have the FDA, what is called as an IRB. It's an independent review board, which any study that you want to do on humans or animals, for that matter, has to go through an IRB. And they look over your protocols and determine whether or not you have a safe structure to test the quote unquote drugs that you're testing on humans. And that's where the difficulty comes in, is getting through that IRB and getting that into a clinical study requires the approval of the IRB, which come from, ready for this, universities.
Well, and
So,
this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, and it puts into perspective how much work was done in eliminating hemp from our resource, from our because,
big
we
time.
now have a legal industry that is, running billions of dollars across the streets and no banking, no testing. People are buying it all the time, but yet we don't have the access to study it to verify the
We
work.
sure don't. And I've looked at the records, and if you look at the agricultural reports from the early 1900s, you'll see that hemp was used as animal feed.
Yeah.
And that data alone exists in all of the federal registers from the late 1800s to up to like 1930. So if Congress or the FDA or somebody would just look at these things and realize that we fed chickens hemp seeds forever. So why are that's what we fed them. Hemp seeds were abundant and they were in massive, massive quantity because hemp was growing everywhere in America.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we call it ditchweed because it grows in the ditches. So it doesn't matter if you drop a seed, it will grow if you're talking about the cannabis or hemp plant. And seeds were everywhere in the early 1900s in the United States. So,
Okay,
where do you want to go with that?
what can and what should the government be doing?
What can and what should what?
The government be doing? What can the government be doing to really assist in this? And what should they really be focusing on?
Well, they have to stop this belief that the plant is theirs. It's not. And it's no different than corn or wheat or apples. It's a plant that we were endowed with by our creator. It was here on the earth long before government existed and managed that plant, which is why it was free for so long. So our represented leaders need to realize that this is ours, the people's, including theirs, and that it is not theirs to control and regulate. Now, they're not going to do that. We know that because they're going to make taxes off of it and they expect to make money off of this plant. So, that being said, they need to allow us to utilize this plant through science based activities. Now, Urban Naturals and Charlotte's Web should have been granted that new dietary ingredient license. No companies on earth have done more work for that subject than they have, yet that denial of that application, there has to be something behind that. And that's where it needs to start. But even that, so if this new dietary ingredient is the path that we end up going down, well, that means every product that goes on the market is going to have to go through incredible safety standards in order to be approved for sale. And I know this firsthand because we've gone through the Novel Food Act, which is the United Kingdom's process. The United Kingdom's ahead of us. So in the US, we don't have a process for this new dietary ingredient, but in the UK, anything that's new over there is called a novel food. And we have taken Materia through the novel food process. It's over a year. It costs a fortune. And you have to test every single thing and identify every single compound in the formulation down to the micromolar level, and then test it for toxicology, subtoxicology, stability. The list just goes on and on. You have a year in stability testing alone to pass this Novel Food Act. So now, once that passes, that gives a single product. And I'm embarrassed to say how much it costs to get a single product through this process to be legal to sell in the United Kingdom. And then you have the same process for the EU, and Australia has adopted it as well. But whether they will share between them, because the UK, the EU, and Australia are all different as far as their regulatory process. So we don't even know if we can share the data from the UK to the EU to Australia. And that's what needs to, if that happens and we don't go the old dietary ingredient route, the only people who will be able to afford to make products will be large corporations. And these legacy vendors and people who have great products and great formulations that exist today, they'll all disappear. So that's one of my biggest concerns is as cannabis legalizes that these patents and these regulatory bodies are going to push this business into large corporations. And then once again, we will have lost control of this plant.
Okay, so I just was typing as you were writing a question, and one of my next questions was going to be what excites you the most. And I feel like you just gave me the what I'm the most afraid of in this industry, went completely opposite direction. But yeah, I'm curious. And then I also want to talk about self-regulation and what it could potentially do to keep it from taking a bad turn.
Sure. Well, that's the key. And we've been spearheading that since day one. And my partner is an industry leader extraordinaire. And that it's self-regulation is where it's all about. Well, let's go back to your first question. So where would you like to start there?
Well, I'm curious about self-regulation. Let's go there. And then at the end, and then I'm curious about what excites you the most. But I just had to throw in, like, here, I'm getting ready to ask a great question.
All right, cool. So self-regulation is, to me, one of the most important things that any company or brand can do. And we started out from day one by putting the owners of the company up on the front page. So we weren't a hidden company. These are the people that own this company. These are the people that if you got a problem, you can come to and talk to. Not a hidden company. We put out full testing, not just cannabinoid testing, but terpenes and micros and heavy metals and the entire full package of testing. That costs a good solid $500 per product to test for your final testing after you've already spent at least that in testing to get there. Then there's things like we make a wonderful chocolate that can intoxicate. So we package it in child-proof packaging. The hemp industry has no regulation on how that is to be done except on an individual state by state level. But we take the extra step and put it in child-proof packaging. Now, on the self-regulatory side, I'm in all kinds of Facebook forums. And just, I don't know, 2 days ago, somebody posted a bag of Skittles. And they were super excited about their Delta 8 Skittles. And there were about 100 comments about how awesome this was. And I jumped in and I said, whoa, guys, this is shameful product. This is intellectual property theft. This is garbage product. And you have no idea even what it is. What's wrong with all you people? And I got lambasted that these are wonderful and they get me high. These are hemp-based Delta 8 products in a package labeled Skittles. And there was 400 milligrams in this package. And this is self-regulatory. These people are violating a half a dozen commerce regulations in making this product. And the consumer still buying it, big problem. And then someone throws in on top of that Reese's Pieces Delta 8. And I love these. And I'm
I've
like,
seen
this
them all.
has to stop. Correct. It has to stop. You can't make products that intoxicate people and put them in packaging that looks like candy. And you certainly can't copy a candy brand and put intoxicating products in that. So these things, the consumer has to say no. And on the self-regulatory side, these are the companies that aren't following the rules. They're certainly not members of the Global Hemp Association or the National Cannabis Industry. You know, they're not parts of these organizations. They don't subscribe to our ethics or morals of how we deal with our plant, and they're just out to make a profit. There are many wonderful companies that are self-regulating immensely. We're doing the ADR results. If anyone reports any issue, if they threw up or had diarrhea or digestive problems, those are recorded by these quality companies. And we keep a record of those for the future, and they're called adverse drug reactions, or adverse responses. So there are 100 things that you can do. Your manufacturing levels. We've brought ourselves to the GFSI SQF, that stands for Global Food Standards Initiative, which was started by Walmart to ensure that the products were safe wherever they were manufactured that went into the Walmart stores. And then SQF, that stands for Safe Quality Foods. That's a global registration, meaning that these foods are reliable and you can count on them, that they're safe, and even different levels of that, allergens. So, and then there's GMP, which the whole world all talks about GMP. GMP sits below these levels of certification, but at minimum, let's manufacture at GMP, not in pool houses and in barns, which is taking place all over the country. There are manufacturers in houses and all across many states, with garage brands that have made it into stores. Some test, some don't. But are they doing that? And then there's labels. I mean, this list just goes on and on. A label is almost getting a doctorate in the FDA to learn how to make a label properly that meets all of the regulatory requirements, and then to get it to fit into all 50 state CBD requirements or hemp requirements. Very difficult. But again, it's putting the effort into those things and then joining the associations, learning the science, learning the technology and the ethics that go with dealing with this plant. We're bringing forth a plant that has great hope for humanity, and we have to do the right thing with it as we bring it forward. So
yes,
that's what's killing me. It's Skittles companies.
I was going to ask you about the interstate and then international exchange of products, right? And the hurdles that had to be overcome and still have to be overcome just to sell product from, say, one side of the country to the other.
Well, from one country to another, we've already
Or
run
sorry.
into that
Yeah.
with the United Kingdom and the United States because
Mhm.
we have to get a number, and same thing with Mexico or with Canada, with any country that you're going to ship to, there has to be a product code which is set into the International Commodities Database, which governments use, and those product codes don't exist yet. So without those product codes, we're shipping things under misnomers of what they actually are in order to navigate the system. So ASTM and the building authorities, they all need to incorporate definitions of hemp and cannabis and give them actual numbers in the system. So we can start moving these numbers forward on a, it's just like the barcodes. Without
Yeah.
the proper barcodes to get through customs, you don't get through customs. And these items, everything has a number that is attached to it with a definition of what it is in commerce on a national and global scale. And those numbers don't exist yet. So
What are those
putting those
numbers
into
called?
place. What's that?
Somebody else brought those numbers up to me the other day. We were talking about trade for the aerospace, and she
Hmm.
mentioned, what are those numbers called? It's like,
Well, there's a variety of societies. The most well known is ASTM.
okay, I know.
That's standards and testings measures. But there's ISBN, there's, oh,
She
geez,
mentioned
I
one, and I couldn't remember. I was hoping maybe it was the same as what you were talking about.
no,
But
there's a whole bunch of them, and it depends. So even chemicals. So all of the compounds of cannabis have to be listed in the chemical transaction database, which has all of the side effects and the flash points, and is it an eye irritant? All of those, all that data needs to be propagated, and it just doesn't exist. So as the pioneers in the industry, every time we go out there to do something, we hit these roadblocks
mhm.
and we have to find creative ways to get around them or change the system in order to make it work. And
Well,
that's
and
what
this is
makes
where
our industry difficult.
it's hard to move capital, right? Because it's
Oh,
very difficult to pave the way for the next guy to come in and have the way paved, right? And so
yeah,
definitely a
I
hurdle.
know.
We talk about this all the time. Like, how do we as an association help bridge that gap? And lately, a lot of the conversation is educating those, the investment side and educating the outside industries that are going to be manufacturing with the industrial products because yeah, there's this
Well, I
thing.
mean, industrial products, it's a nightmare because there's no infrastructure for industrial products whatsoever. So the hemp clothing that I'm wearing came from China.
Yeah.
And I mean, how are you going to grow the hemp, process the hemp fibers, and then manufacture it into clothing in the United States? There's only 4 facilities that I'm aware of that take yarn and turn it into fabric in the United States on a commercial level. So
Let
all that's
alone,
done overseas.
yeah, let
Yeah,
alone
let alone pull the actual plant apart and create the fiber. So, the decortication, we don't have that equipment. That equipment left the United States with prohibition, and the only stuff that's out there is in Eastern Europe, and most of it's like 70 years old.
yeah,
So we have no infrastructure to do any of these things. And the hemp flooring company that bought an oak flooring company that tried to do it, they went out of business and went back.
yeah, there's a
They
lot of
Well, their
there's a
flooring's not approved as a building product, so they can make all the hemp flooring they want. It's not an approved building product. So if you're going to build a house, you can only use approved building products.
yeah, there's a lot of
So
hurdles that definitely have to be overcome on the industrial side. Well, on both sides, right? But definitely
yeah,
the infrastructure build out. And it's such a different conversation than the cannabinoid side, right? The
oh, big
processing, the markets, even I get a lot of students or even students mostly that have studied the cannabinoid market, and then we start talking about the fiber industry or the carbon footprint around it, and it's just a completely different conversation. It's just mind-boggling how far the
oh
tentacles are
yeah.
spread when we talk about cannabis and hemp, but
Well,
it's
move
exciting.
on to graphene and semiconductors and batteries. And that'll really get them
Oh yeah,
going.
yeah, the
So
energy
we've seen
sector
all
is
that
exciting.
product. Yeah, they're making graphene from hemp right now, so which is absolutely amazing. But I've physically seen it, touched it, held it. It exists. It's just getting these things in large quantities at a cost-effective rate. And that's what we're missing. I paid $24 for a pair of underwear. Yeah, I
Well, we've
mean,
got
I'd like to buy them for 6. Yeah, but that's what they cost to buy them in today's market because the products don't exist and there is very little manufacturing.
yes,
We need to up that infrastructure.
which means big opportunities, right? It's just a matter of
Huge opportunities for the people who have the money to team with the people who understand how to get this job done and what it takes and what's needed.
that's you're speaking my language. This excites me. And I know everybody on the call right now. I have to give another shout out for those that are listening. Thank you very much for joining today. If you have any last minute questions as we get ready to wrap out, drop them in the chat. Let me know that you're here. We'd love to say hello. But Keith, what excites you then the most about the future of the hemp industry?
There's a few things that graphene is huge.
Yeah.
And, we've already seen aircraft created out of hemp and vehicles created out of hemp. They're now working on batteries. I'm all for the fuel. I'd like to see us get independent again. I'd like to see the hemp plant being grown in all 50 states on a local community basis and infrastructure being set around that so that we can actually utilize it instead of it all going to waste. I don't know if you're aware of the millions of pounds that went to waste over the past 2 years because there was nowhere to process the material that was grown.
Or because it was hot. Like this is another piece.
Oh, that too. That's a whole nother thing. But
like these.
No, it should never be destroyed because it was over 0.3. It should be remediated or the use changed, but never destroy the labor and the outcome of the soil and the sun and the work. It's insane.
Or even the stock, like once it's been processed and the flower is removed, that stock in some states cannot be sold outside of the medical market. And so then it becomes waste and it's
insanity. It's absolute insanity. But outside of that, what I see is as the science continues, like the science we're doing and some of the other high level companies or PhDs or MDs that are doing this work, that we're ultimately going to see custom therapeutic benefits from cannabinoids based on individuals and their DNA profiles. And somewhere down the road, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to have cannabinoids. More than likely, they'll be synthesized, but we will know the cannabinoids that you are lacking as a human being and what will bring your body back into balance by knowing the amounts and what actual compounds are missing, what we're not producing enough of. And we'll be able to supplement that on an individual basis and live much healthier lives. So that to me is super exciting. I know we're going to take hemp to space. We've already done it. One of my team members put hemp on the International Space Station and did some experiments up there. So, it's super cool. But we had 3 trips scheduled. I know we've only done 1 so far, I believe, but we've gone to space with hemp, and I believe we're going to be colonizing wherever we go. We're going to bring this plant with us. It is super important. So the future is unlimited with hemp. It really comes down to education. And if we could increase the education level of consumers and politicians that hemp and cannabis are the same and that it is the most useful plant that we have, and we should put all types of money into research and technology for these plants so we can better the future of our children and ourselves.
Absolutely. Okay, so a couple other questions real quick. What are the state level organizations we should be talking to about the ODI?
So that's your state legislators. We need to get them to approve hemp CBD, which please don't use the term CBD. Hemp is much more than that. Cannabidiol is one of hundreds of compounds which are found in the plant, but of being able to utilize hemp as an old dietary ingredient, meaning that hemp will be lawful in the state to be introduced into the food supply, both through food or beverage. And just like cannabis being legalized, that the federal government said that we couldn't, we need the states to do the same thing because the federal government says we can't put hemp inside a food or beverage. So each state needs to produce its own law that says, yes, we can put hemp inside a food or beverage. Now, California notably just did this about a month ago. And we're hoping that this is the lead across the nation. Colorado had already done it. Florida has also done it. There are a few more states. So it started just like the legalization of cannabis. And I believe, and so do the people behind this, that once we've reached the critical mass and we've gone over 35 states, that the federal government will have to follow suit, which is where we're at right now with the legalization of cannabis. So one state at a time is the way I've been told to do it, other than through the director of Health and Human Services, or arguably through Joe Biden right now. Congress, I can't see it happening. They can't get something like this done. They can't all agree on it. So it's those individual persons or the spearheads to the states, which I really wanted to do, but there's just not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
So we need volunteers to go and spearhead this. And if there are people out there that want to do it, we do have the tools to make that work.
Okay, so I would love to support, and it sounds like there's other people on the call also who would love to get involved. How do people reach out or get connected to you to potentially move this forward?
That's a good question. So our main website for my group is Think Hempy Thoughts.
I love it.
It's think HEMPY thoughts.com. That has all of our brands there and links and email addresses and phone numbers, and links to about 9 websites and our podcast, Anslinger, the Untold Cannabis Conspiracy. That podcast was created by Annie Rouse, and it's Annie Rouse is a rock star in the industry, and that podcast is available at Think Hempy Thoughts also.
I love it.
So that would be the best place, I would think, to come in, and I'm on almost all of the websites, and there's a link to all of them that gets to us.
Awesome. Awesome. So, and then I'm happy to help also, right? And so if there are any of you listening and we want to get together and spearhead some of this, I'm happy to help facilitate some of that or get a group together that could potentially help.
So I also work on this at the National Cannabis Industry Association. I'm the head of this project there. So if you send an email in to NCIA, you can reach them through, I think it's thecannabisindustry.org. If you send an email in to the NCIA and tell them that you support the ODI project, everyone there knows that's me. So I would love to have the industry itself seeing this too, that there are people out there who support this and believe in this outside of me running around inside the industry trying to get everyone to join the bandwagon.
Okay, so I just left a note. Awesome, Keith. Well, I sure appreciate your time. Thank you so much. If there's anything else that we can do to support you as an association, please let me know. Besides that, let's get back together and collaborate again. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Sure. Well, I'd give a shout out to my favorite brand, Hemp Mellow.
Yes.
Hemp Mellow's got the Materia Plus in it, and Hemp Mellow is the sponsor of the Virginia Seeds giveaway this weekend. And we're building Hemp Mellow as a cool brand that really works. Spectacular products. They're micro-dosed hemp-based THC products. Really, really effective. And really just anything that you can do to help or support the hemp and cannabis industry, whether it's just getting your neighbors to understand that hemp and cannabis are safe and good for you, or in Virginia, picking up some seeds this weekend and growing, and when that plant is finished, giving it to a veteran or somebody in need. But it's really about the education. So anything you can do to help educate people out there, I'm very grateful.
I love it. Well, just a reminder, I want to give a shout out to some few people that are listening. Sandra, Hannah, Josh, Marla, Nancy all chimed in earlier, and I didn't give them a shout out. So I want to real quick say thank you very much for
guys.
There's quite a few people that are still on listening, so we really appreciate you.
Oh, one more thing I want to point out.
Yeah, do it.
Last Prisoner Project.
Yes.
LPP.org. Last Prisoner Project is an excellent organization dedicated to getting all cannabis prisoners out of jail. So if you can donate, please donate.
Yes. They've got great things going on.
LPP is wonderful.
Steve's got so many great things going on. I love listening to all the stuff he's doing too. So
Steve's a rock star.
it's
So,
crazy.
but LPP is the best, and that's his true calling right there. So
It's humbling.
It's a wonderful organization. So donate and support if you can.
Please. Okay, well, thank you guys very, very much for joining. We'll see you tomorrow. I actually have another call this afternoon. It's an R&D. I think it's at 4:00 Eastern time today. You can find our link on hemphallway.org or globalhempassociation.com, or sorry, hemphallway.com. I always mess this up, or globalhempassociation.org. But chime in. There's a couple of different people talking about their feasibility studies and R&D projects, which is pretty cool. And then tomorrow we've got another interview at 10 a.m. with Bo Whitney. So come back and join, and we'll dive into the economics around all of this. So, okay, Keith, thank you very much for your time, and we'll sign off and see you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Think Hempy Thoughts.